好，多謝各位出席啦。我係Howard，我來自中電嘅，我係中電嘅策略發展高級經理。咁頭先Stephen 都introduce咗，咁我都唔多講啦。今日個 presentation 就用英文準備嘅，咁大家唔介意我轉一轉 channel 做英文啦。So for today's talk, I prepared 3 topics. The first part is a brief introduction to our company and our decarbonisation journey to date. And then I'll talk about our future plans for decarbonised electricity in Hong Kong. And then finally, I'll deep dive into why energy efficiency is so important for successfully decarbonising Hong Kong. CLP has been in Hong Kong for over 120 years now. So we've evolved with Hong Kong from a small town into a global city over the years. And today we serve around 80% of our population spread over Kowloon, New Territories, Lantau, and outlying islands as well. We're an integrated business, so we operate our own power plants, transmission distribution assets, and offer retail services as well. Hong Kong is a unique city. And some examples as to why that is. 50% of the population is living or working above the 15th floor in Hong Kong, and there are more than 71,000 elevators operating every day. And our rail network, which relies on electricity, serves 6 million people on average every day. This makes a stable and reliable electricity supply particularly important to ensure the city's daily operations are safe and smooth. Hong Kong is a highly electrified city, and according to EMSD's data, around 70% of the residential sector and 90% of the commercial sector's energy needs are met by electricity. Overall, around 60% of the energy used in Hong Kong is electricity as of 2022. It might have increased since then. And this is also why we feel a deep sense of responsibility to help our city decarbonize and reach net zero by 2050. This commitment actually goes back decades. Although electricity demand today has nearly doubled since 1990, we've managed to reduce air pollution emission by over 90%. And we've also seen significant improvement in carbon emissions as well. In addition to implementing various emission reduction measures, our power generation fuel mix has also continuously evolved. In 1990, we mainly utilized coal for power generation because it's cheap and it's reliable, but carbon emissions were relatively high. To reduce carbon emissions, we cooperated with Guangdong province to develop the Daya Bay nuclear plant. Then we introduced natural gas from the South China Sea, balancing the 3 generation fuels. With that, we managed to reduce carbon emissions by over half in the last 35 years. Achieving the current emission levels has not been easy. It's been a result of 35 years of effort. As I mentioned, much of our society relies on electricity. So in addition to making significant strides toward lowering carbon emissions, maintaining high supply reliability and a reasonable tariff are equally important as well. This is the challenge we'll continue to face as we seek to further decarbonize our electricity supply. So after our brief introduction, I would like to dive into how our sector intends to reach net zero carbon by 2050. Being responsible for a large portion of energy supply in Hong Kong, we work closely with the government to continuously develop, implement, and refine our decarbonisation strategy. The Climate Action Plan 2050 clearly sets out the decarbonisation pathway for the electricity generation sector, with 2 milestones clearly laid out. By 2035, we will cease the use of coal for power generation and replace it with zero carbon energy. And with this, zero carbon energy will reach 60 to 70% of our supply mix. 7.5 to 10% will be renewable energy. Electricity consumption for buildings will also be reduced by a significant amount through energy efficiency. And by 2050, we'll transition away completely from carbon-emitting power generation and reach net zero. By 2035, with coal phase out and with increase in zero carbon electricity, carbon emission intensity for electricity supply will be a quarter of what it is today. With this, we will reduce the total carbon emissions in Hong Kong by 50% compared to 2005. This is a challenging endeavor, and Hong Kong has limited potential for RE or renewable energy to fully decarbonize our power supplies. First of all, for solar power, although the price of PV modules has dropped significantly, the problem remains that it requires a lot of land. By my estimation, around 20 Victoria parks would be needed to meet just 1% of electricity consumption in Hong Kong. Many innovative solar installations have been implemented in Hong Kong, and we ourselves have launched a feed-in tariff to encourage rooftop solar installations for our customers' premises. But we don't anticipate this to be sufficient for making a significant contribution for reaching net zero. Wind energy is another mainstream renewable energy technology. Wind power works by extracting kinetic energy from wind, and Hong Kong has low wind speeds compared to the likes of Northern Europe, for example. That is at the low or medium working level, working range of a wind turbine. In recent years, turbine sizes have grown at a rapid pace and allowing greater energy capture with smaller land requirement. The larger the wind turbine, the more wind energy it can capture, because the higher the wind turbine hub is, the higher wind speed it is. Most new wind projects have reached heights between 100 to 200 meters nowadays. But the question is, where can we put such a large structure? And this is where offshore wind comes in, where we can be afforded more space. But offshore wind power is significantly more complex than onshore wind power, because of the dynamic loads from the moving waves, because of the uncertain seabed conditions, and the complexity of building and maintaining assets in the sea offshore. And this makes it inherently more expensive. And coupled with low wind speeds, this makes wind power challenging to implement in Hong Kong. Because of the limitations in renewable energy potential in Hong Kong, regional cooperation to import more zero carbon electricity will be important. China has been and is developing a number of nuclear power plants, as well as offshore wind farms adjacent to Hong Kong. If sufficient transmission capacity can be built, they can provide further reliable sources of zero carbon electricity to Hong Kong. At the moment, 80% of the electricity from Daya Bay is sent to Hong Kong. And the regional cooperation arrangement has been in place for nearly 30 years. Nuclear power does not have the intermittent issues that renewable energy has. The cost is stable and predictable, unlike oil or coal prices. We believe that nuclear power will play a major role in replacing our fossil fuel generation in the coming decades. Strengthening regional cooperation and enhancing interconnection development with Guangdong will help with decarbonization, reliability, and also tariff stability. With the additional zero carbon electricity coming into our supply mix, we will seek to pivot our existing generation assets towards meeting times of higher demand in order to balance our system so that we can maintain a high supply reliability. This requires making our gas generation units highly flexible, as well as maintaining our other assets to bridge the supply and demand gap, and includes securing sufficient energy supply storage as well, energy storage capacity, sorry, as well as implementing demand side response together. By 2050, we will seek to repurpose our gas generation assets to zero carbon hydrogen. Upon achieving this, we will have reached net zero for electricity supply in Hong Kong. Hydrogen is a chemical, and it exists in abundance in outer space, but on Earth is relatively rare. But it can be made from various processes, one of which is to perform electrolysis on water, applying electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is then harnessed and then stored for energy generation. If the source of electricity for electrolysis is renewable and is zero carbon, such as wind and solar, this type of hydrogen is called zero carbon hydrogen. And zero carbon hydrogen must be used if we are to reach net zero. There are other ways to make hydrogen, such as by chemical reformation of natural gas and coal. But with this process, it emits carbon dioxide, and it must be captured and stored to be classified as low carbon hydrogen. Because capture is not 100% effective, there will be a few percent remaining emissions. If this carbon is not captured, then the hydrogen generated would have high carbon intensity, and this is called gray hydrogen. Today, hydrogen is normally produced near its point of use and in small quantities, so it's typically compressed and delivered by trucks. If there's sufficient volume, then a pipeline would make sense, which tends to be the most simple and therefore the cheapest method of transmission. Or it can be liquefied by freezing it to minus 253 degrees. This condenses the hydrogen significantly, and then it can be transported very long distances. There are other methods of hydrogen transport and storage, such as ammonia conversion or liquid organic hydrogen compounds. Each has its own pros and cons as a hydrogen carrier. We're planning to turn our existing natural gas turbines into hydrogen turbines. And this requires modifications to the turbine and its auxiliary systems, because the energy contained in hydrogen is different to natural gas. We're planning for low percentage of blending, hydrogen blending, as a trial at our Black Point power station in the coming years, so that we can prepare ourselves for this change. Once, if CLP becomes if CLP uses hydrogen for power generation in the future, we will become the single largest consumer of hydrogen in Hong Kong by far. But the problem is today, zero carbon hydrogen remains expensive. 20% is produced as industrial byproducts, 55% is through coal gasification, and another 20% is through steam methane reformation. The latter two are highly carbon intensive. And we believe that zero carbon hydrogen production costs will fall as production levels up and experience builds up. We estimate that it will take until the early 2040s for zero carbon hydrogen to become cost competitive against other existing fuels, such as natural gas. For these reasons and uncertainty, carbon capture, utilization, and storage can be an alternative to hydrogen generation if Guangdong develops carbon utilization and permanent carbon storage sites. This would allow the continuation of fossil fuel use with significant emissions reductions, around 90% or more. And this serves as an important alternative for us. I know that there are a lot of fellow professionals from various sectors here or online. So for the final section, I'd like to quickly highlight an important message. From my earlier slide, you will have seen the energy end-use data from EMSD. Energy consumption of the transport sector makes up around 30% of the total energy consumption in Hong Kong and exceeds the entire residential sector at the moment. 96% of this need is being met by carbon-intensive fuels, mainly petrol and diesel and LPG. Energy efficiency and decarbonization goes hand in hand because the simplest way to decarbonize is to use less energy. The end-to-end energy value chain efficiency for direct use of electricity in electric vehicles is triple that of petrol cars, and it's double that of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. The number of electric vehicles in Hong Kong has grown at a near exponential pace in just over the last few years. We went from 2% of all vehicles to 12% last year, but 98% of electric vehicles are private passenger cars. Commercial and public transport road vehicles electrification in Hong Kong has lagged behind many jurisdictions, including many cities in the mainland. EV technologies have improved at a rapid pace. Battery energy density has already increased by 8 times from 2008 to 2020. CATL's latest condensed matter battery offers 500 watt-hours per kilogram. It's double of its current products. And it's 2.7 times higher than some of the latest electric buses battery used. Some of the latest passenger vehicles charging rate reaches 350 kilowatts. This is 7 times the improvement from just a few years ago. There are 387 electric vehicles that are type approved by Transport Department and available in Hong Kong. That comprises of 300 private cars and 87 commercial vehicles. CLP, Hong Kong Electric, and the commercial sector are working progressively to upgrade the public standard chargers into medium chargers and install multiple multi-standard quick chargers as well. EV suppliers are also proactive in adding EV chargers for their electric vehicle models at public venues as well. And we also provide EV owners with one-stop service for installing chargers at their parking spaces. The remaining operational constraints related to range and refueling time for medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles can be solved by developments in the near future. Electrification of commercial vehicles is crucial for decarbonizing the transport sector, because electric vehicles are the most efficient form of motorized mobility. Carbon intensity of CLP supply will drop to 0.1 kilograms of CO2 per unit of electricity by 2035, in line with the government's Climate Action Plan target. Although we've clearly laid out a plan for zero carbon electricity that balances cost, reliability, and environmental performance, decarbonization requires a multi-pronged approach. And reaching net zero for Hong Kong requires the support of every industry and every member of society. I've used transport as an example of how electrification can be a catalyst for decarbonizing a sector. But this point is equally applicable to others. And my message to you and people online is that when we're thinking about a transition towards zero carbon energy, think about the cost, think about the maturity of the end-use technologies, and most importantly, think about the end-to-end energy efficiency as well. So although it's been brief, I hope you found this talk interesting, and thank you for listening.